He stole everything. My father sold my dying mother's house to his mistress until a secret garden box fought back. Financial abuse case. Imagine watching your life savings, your mother's final legacy, and your family home, the Obsidian Tower, all vanish, sold out from under you by the person you were supposed to trust most, your own father. For 2 years, I fought not just a legal battle, but a war against pure financial evil, against my father and his new wife, Vesper, who were draining my mother's money even as she lay dying of the crimson rot. They thought they won when they offered me an insult of a settlement. But this story doesn't end with a signature. It ends with a secret garden discovery that changed everything and brought about a reckoning they never saw coming. Get ready to rage with me. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what's the biggest betrayal you've ever witnessed? Let's dive into this insanity. My father, a mere shadow of his former self, sold the ancestral home, the Obsidian Tower, which my deceased mother, Lady Azura, had left to me, fulfilling the decree of his new wife, Vesper, who demanded a sterile starting point for their future. This betrayal drove me to seek the asset's gilded ransom. Upon arriving from my weekly visit to tend to my mother's cherished Moonpetal Garden, I was met by a sold sign and strangers moving a neon green sectional into the house, only to find my serpent head relic key no longer worked, confirming the sale had been finalized 3 weeks prior, an act of high financial treason executed without my knowledge. Mother's will, dictated on polished courts before witnesses 2 years earlier, had clearly designated the Obsidian Tower to Jezebel to maintain the garden. Yet father cited a fabricated void tax compliance financial purge directive as his reason, claiming he was merely sorting the estate's coordinates. I immediately drove to his new gravity-defying Sky Fortress condo, where Vesper, clad in fluorescent latex, greeted me with a predatory smirk before handing me the communicator to confront my father, still in his golfing armor. He theatrically feigned ignorance, claiming the tower was marital property and that mother's cognition was compromised by the rot, spectacularly lying that her ancestors had not gifted it to her before their marriage, and admitting Vesper dictated they needed a fresh start because the house had uncomfortable wavelengths. I shrieked that her sanctuary, containing her ancestors' DNA, was irrelevant to his mistress's needs, but he coldly stated the funds were fully metabolized to purchase the exorbitantly expensive Sky Fortress for Vesper, prioritizing her tangible, currently breathing reality over the legacy of his extinct wife and the needs of his own living family. When he offered a paltry 10,000 units of credit for a 400,000-unit property, I stood up, declared my intent to find a legal combat strategist, and delivered a final, calculated counterstrike. I possessed the spare access relic to Mother's hidden safety deposit crypt, a revelation that bleached his face a spectral white. The next morning, before sunrise, I drove to the Grand Repository of Wealth, presented the required documentation to the branch overseer, Nexus, and was escorted into the vault chamber, where with a shaking hand, I used the brass relic to open crypt 447, finding inside a sealed envelope addressed to Jezebel, a thick folder, and a small lacquered jewelry box. The safe deposit box yielded undeniable proof against my father. The initial item was a 3-page letter from my mother, Lady Azura, who confessed she knew of father's affair with Vesper and predicted his post-mortem attempt to seize the Obsidian Tower, instructing me to initiate a quote-unquote total counteroffensive with the gathered evidence to reclaim the home intended for my future kin. The core of the evidence was contained in a folder featuring the tower's title deed, proving it was transferred solely to Mother from the architects 26 years prior to her marriage, along with 2 decades of tax scrolls and bank records confirming her sole financial maintenance, all reinforced by a certified scroll from the Architects' Council, nullifying any spousal claim. Crucially, I found a notarized psychoaptitude statement dated 3 months before her death, affirming her perfectly sound cognitive function and explicitly declaring the tower was my material allotment, forbidding its liquidation or transfer to her husband, a document that eliminated any room for alternate vectors of interpretation. A small jewelry box contained 3 ancestral rings and a final addendum stipulating that Vesper's touch is forbidden. After photographing and duplicating the entire evidence matrix at the bank and formalizing my access to the crypt, I immediately secured an urgent appointment with an estate deconstruction strategist, Serafina Volkov, whose expertise was, quote, reversing interfamily inheritance piracy. I drove to her office, presented the entire history of the Crimson Rot, the fraudulent tax purge directive, and the 400,000-unit liquidation for Vesper's Sky Fortress, which led Serafina to confirm I possessed an exceptionally strong case. She analyzed that father's liquidation of the asset against mother's direct, documented command constituted a severe breach of fiduciary duty, warning me that winning would require amassing rock-solid proof of his malicious intent to benefit himself and Vesper, and confirming the total destruction of any residual familial bond. Accepting the cost, I agreed to proceed, and Serafina immediately arranged a strategy meeting for the following morning at 9 a.m. with her partner, Lorraine Volkov, an expert in probate takedowns and inheritance piracy, whose frightening singular focus promised a relentless legal assault.
The tactical briefing with Lorraine Volkov immediately defined the objective: a total reversal of the transaction or the full remittance of the 400,000 units plus punitive damages, with the understanding that this lawsuit would reduce all familial bonds to ionized plasma. Lorraine warned that father's legal strategist, Dashel would wage psychological warfare to delegitimize me as a greedy histrionic victim, framing father as a responsible fiduciary agent. Within 1 week, Lorraine filed the lawsuit for asset conversion and fiduciary fraud. Father's furious, screaming voicemail in retaliation, which he archived after I let his stacked calls go to voicemail, was immediately secured and forwarded to Lorraine, who dispatched a cease and desist communication restricting all future discourse to legal channels. 2 weeks later, father's attorney, Dashel filed a motion for case dismissal, claiming father's purge directive gave him absolute supremacy and arguing mother's testament was too vague, framing me as an entitled appendage. Lorraine and Serafina architected a counter-motion, attaching mother's notarized statement and the title deed proving the tower was separate, untouchable property, meticulously arguing father's actions constituted a breach of fiduciary duty by plundering the estate for his own decadent consumption. The tribunal judge denied the dismissal, setting a formal hearing for 3 months away. While my former husband, Dorian, offered unexpected co-parenting flexibility to shield the children from the conflict, the financial strain was severe. My savings of 6,000 units evaporated, forcing me to secure a subprime loan and work every available auxiliary shift, funneling every unit into the legal war chest. The legal battle intensified when Dashel launched invasive discovery missives, demanding 5 years of my complete financial history, all digital communications with mother, and data on my entire relationship history, a toxic archaeological dig intended to discredit me. In turn, Serafina and Lorraine prepared a counter-discovery, requesting all documentation related to the tower's liquidation, father's bank records showing the disbursement path of the 400,000 units, and his communications with Vesper. 2 weeks later, Lorraine's investigator, Andre, uncovered a damning anomaly. Father had fraudulently reported the sale price as 350,000 units on certain tax filings, indicating a potential 50,000 unit shadow account. Even more horrifying, Father had secured an undisclosed HELOC, a home equity line of credit, against Mother's tower for 50,000 units 6 months before her death, weaponizing his authority to systematically pilfer assets while she was dying from the rot. This evidence, bolstered by a leak from a county records office worker, Valerie, confirming Father's lawyers were seeking loopholes to claim ownership, catapulted the case into a new dimension of premeditated financial battery. Lorraine immediately filed an amended complaint, adding the undisclosed HELOC and the tax fraud allegations. When Father's attorney filed angry motions demanding sanctions for what they termed defamatory and unsubstantiated accusations, the judge denied the sanctions motion, validating the gravity of our allegations. However, the judge then ordered both factions into mandatory mediation with Carmela Fisher, an unyielding mediator, before the main hearing. The first session commenced with palpable, silent tension at Carmela's office, with Father, Vesper, and their attorney positioned opposite me, Serafina and Lorraine, who formed a human fortress ready to deploy the damning evidence of the secret loan and sale price discrepancy.
The mandatory mediation began with Father's attorney, Dashel announcing a generous good faith offer of 75,000 units as a settlement, an intentional insult representing less than 20% of the tower's value. I instantly rejected the offer, and Serafina countered with our non-negotiable demand for 450,000 units, 400,000 for the asset's full value, plus 50,000 for damages, a demand Dashel mocked as preposterous, threatening years of appeals to exhaust my legal funding. During a brief decompression period, Vesper ambushed me in the hallway, lecturing me on morality and the cardiac strain of the litigation. I delivered a lethal reckoning, condemning her as a common home wrecker and a deceitful parasite with zero moral authority, forcing her retreat. The session resumed in an absolute stalemate, with Dashel fixed at 75,000 units and Lorraine at 450,000 units, leading Carmela Fisher to mandate a second session in 3 weeks, hoping the temporal buffer would allow for rational assessment. Back at home, viewing old photos of my mother's cherished yellow chamber of promise, now violated by strangers, recalibrated my motivation, strengthening my resolve to fight for the tangible connection Mother intended for my children. Shortly thereafter, Andre initiated an encrypted comlink with a devastating new payload of evidence. He successfully tracked the disbursement of the $50,000 HELOC Father secured against the tower 6 months prior to Mother's death, immediately after her initial crimson rot diagnosis. Credit transfer statements confirmed Father and Vesper had embarked on an extravagant European consumption tour with those funds, utilizing assets stolen directly from his dying wife for Vesper's luxury acquisition mandates, while Mother underwent debilitating chemotherapy. The financial malfeasance escalated to a criminal apex. Andre found Father had opened a secret joint account with Vesper 2 months prior to Mother's death, and only 3 weeks before she passed away, he executed an immediate transfer of 30,000 units from the estate, the sum earmarked from Mother's final medical protocols and funeral incineration, into this covert account. Vesper was executing extravagant withdrawals and luxury purchases from that account, while Mother was actively dying. This systematic robbery from the dying crossed the threshold for criminal prosecution for elder abuse or financial exploitation. I instantly directed Lorraine to initiate the criminal reporting protocol, filing detailed complaints with both the County Elder Protection Matrix and the District Attorney's Office to compel state-level accountability. 3 weeks later, Father's ID signaled a voicemail, his voice shaking and unnatural, in which he accused me of attempting to systemically incinerate him and Vesper over a minor, benign misunderstanding.
He demanded I immediately withdraw the criminal complaints, offering to resolve this internally if I embraced a reasonable posture, before concluding with an ultimatum. You have 1 solar cycle to rescind the complaints, or I will be forced to execute protective measures. Lorraine immediately declared the message an explicit threat, which, when combined with his pattern of financial exploitation, provided sufficient grounds for filing a legal proximity restriction order, restraining order.
The final reckoning. After 2 years of soul-crushing legal battles against my father and Vesper, fighting for Mother's stolen legacy, I thought the $334,000 settlement was the end, the price of my peace. I built a new life, a new garden, and was ready to close that painful chapter. The unsettled score. But deep down, I always felt Father won the moral battle by walking away untouched. Seeing that final anonymous message, the clue about the Obsidian Tower and the hidden compartment in the Moonpetal Garden shed, has shattered my fragile peace and forced me to confront the unfinished business of justice. The call to action. I need your counsel before I take this terrifying next step. If you've been invested in this fight for Lady Azura and the truth, please hit the like button and subscribe so we can see this through together. Tell me in the comments right now, do I risk the peace I've earned to pursue this final act of justice and try to claim the tower? Let me know, and I'll see you soon for the next chapter.